Welcome to Real Talk in the Face of Danger, a podcast series by the Department of Emergency Management here in Barbados. Now, this is the 12th episode in this current series, and I'm absolutely honored to be a part of today's presentation. I'm Kerry Hinds. It's so important for us to talk about 2021 because it's one of those years that has been the most active in years. And here in Barbados, as relates to hazards, we have had quite the time. The island felt the impacts of nature's fury from as early as January of this year with Saharan dust and a prolonged drought. Now, in April, we experienced heavy ashfall, which resulted from the La Soufriere volcano eruptions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And only 3 months later, in July, the island received a direct hit from Hurricane Elsa, causing damage to hundreds of properties. Of course, all of this took place in the midst of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So we really want to take a look back because these events have all increased the workload of the emergency response organizations here on island, particularly the Department of Emergency Management, or the DEM as many of us know it. Joining me this good day to give us a short review of the work that the DEM has done this year is Director Miss Kerry Hinds. Hello.
Good morning, Tisha. Good morning, Barbados. Good morning, everyone online today. It is really to be here on the other side of the year, here this morning, really to take a retrospective look at what we would have gone through in 2021. 2021 was indeed busy and eventful for us at the Department of Emergency Management and also the entire emergency response community. As you quite rightly said, we had to deal with multiple hazards, and looking at the orientation and our programming, we do push the whole concept of comprehensive disaster management, looking at the multiple hazards that can affect us, and also the various players that will have to come in to play, the various stakeholders that would have to come into play when we are dealing or grappling with these multiple hazards. So I think 2021 is really a prime example of us living in a multi-hazard environment. And as you quite rightly said, it started early, and I must admit that it followed on from 2020 because we were already dealing with COVID or the COVID response. And we at the DEM, we were supporting the Ministry of Health and Wellness and all the other agencies through that particular response. And then as well, we were also supporting the drought management mechanism. As you know, those early months were very dry months for us here in Barbados, and a number of parishes, the public was affected with the very low availability of water. In the traditional sense, yes, we would have had a number of our planning meetings, but I dare say we were in a response mode for the entire year.
All
And
right. But with that said, though, let's go back to January, where
mhm,
it all started. And I want to find out from you how you feel about your state of readiness at that time for dealing with, natural disasters or hazards. You mentioned coming out of 2020, there were some challenges, but 2021 really took on a different face.
mhm.
So, starting then, how prepared would you say the DEM was for dealing with these hazards that we had to grapple with?
Well, we were prepared in the traditional sense. We had our plans and procedures. Obviously, we had to tweak them to suit the environment, the new operating environment. Um, Traditionally, our responses were were such that the various emergency responders and the community would go out in their numbers. But with COVID, we had to use a lot of the technology, and we utilized that whole interface where we had virtual response to certain aspects of the emergency, but still with still going out in the field, but adhering to the protocols as it related to COVID 19, the COVID 19 response. Um, it was a very delicate balance, but I would say in some instances we were prepared to respond. In others, there were new eventualities during the year. There were certainly the having responding in an emergency management environment under COVID conditions, and then dealing with, say, for example, the significant ashfall. That was very novel to us as DEM and an emergency management community. So we really had to amend and tweak and update our plans and protocols, and sometimes learn as you go along while you were in the heat of things. Um,
Now, as you
so
mentioned, many of us experience ashfall for the very first time. Talk to us about what that experience was like, first of all, for your staff, and tell us how your organization assisted in the aftermath of all of that ashfall that Barbados experienced.
Well, it was quite new to all of us here at the Department of Emergency Management, and quite like most of the public. That significant ashfall really slowed initially our responses as an emergency management, an emergency response community. The For days, we were not able, in the traditional sense, really to respond to everyone. We really had to do our protect ourselves for ourselves first and foremost, and ensure that our households were adequate. They were protected, and before we could really respond, when we did initially respond, we responded in the sense that you had one to assist those here in Barbados that were depending on you, the public that was depending on you, but also you, as a SEDEMA sub-regional focal point, Barbados is that, we also had to respond to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and support that larger regional response. So I would say, because it was new, and because the conditions were not necessarily that conducive when we in the initial days, the response was very slow. And as I said before, we were dealing with something new, so we had to source information from some regional and international experts on how to deal with the ashfall, how to quantify the losses and the impact of the ashfall, dealing with our damage assessment and not the best of conditions, but trying to gather that information that would help in the response.
Now, if that wasn't bad enough, later in the year, Barbadians had to grapple with Hurricane Elsa. And we know that when a hurricane warning is issued, the National Emergency Operations Center, or the NEOC, is activated. As director, tell us a little bit about your role in the NEOC. I know from where we sit in the media, we have to get somebody over there. It's like a direct line from us so that we can share with our viewers and listeners. But talk to us about your role in the
Once the emergency operations center is activated, as director, you have to ensure that all the operatives who are present at the National Emergency Operations Center, they're thoroughly briefed and they have a comprehensive awareness of the situation at hand. Um, and these briefings are done first off, as well as intermittently throughout the whole operational cycles. And I say operational cycles because they're usually continuous over a period of time. Um, the As director, I am the link between the operational and the operational responders, that operational group, and the policy grouping, the strategic level grouping, and I have to ensure that all the stakeholders within those two groupings have a clear picture of what is, yes, going on the ground, what are our operational priorities, and what are our strategic priorities as we go through the, the whole event, and ensuring that there is a constant flow of information, because that information is needed to make the best decisions possible at any point in time. Also, I have a responsibility to the public, and it is done through you, the media, and to ensure that the public is kept abreast of what is going on and they have pertinent information that they will need to make any decisions that they have to make at a personal or household level. Um, Within the EOC, as I said before, we have to determine our priority actions, and these may change. You may realize that at one point in the cycle, there are certain priorities. You have to prioritize what actions, what resources you have um, to lend to a particular issue that you may be having on the ground. Um, that may change from hour to hour. It is always a fast paced environment. And equally, I also have a responsibility to the persons who are gathered at the Emergency Operations Center to ensure that they have the tools to do their jobs and they are in an environment that is conducive really for them carrying out their particular functions.
Now, you really take this role seriously. And, I must commend you for your work as well. A little birdie told me that in addition to all of these duties, you also took on helping to prepare breakfast for some of the staff who were there at the Emergency Operations Center while that was all going on. So take us behind the scenes a little bit. Separate and apart from the helping out with the breakfast and so on, talk to us about what a day was like during the passage of Hurricane Elsa, uh, because of everything you talked about, multiple things that will be happening on the ground, and just trying to coordinate it all.
The Emergency Operations Center environment during ELSA, like a lot of other operations, are long hours. It is a 24-hour cycle in the early days, especially in any response. You do not know sometimes how long the response will be. There is always non-stop and heightened activity in terms of, as I said, information sharing with the briefings, the continuous receipt of information, channeling and prioritizing information and resources. Remember that we were in a COVID environment. So we had reduced the numbers without compromising our response. We reduced the numbers in our EOC. So while that meant that there were a lot of tasks to do, you did things virtually. There was a lot of support virtually as well, but you had to maintain that level of a comprehensive operational picture, making sure that we were like the glue. We had to ensure that this crisis coordination center was working at all times. Now, typically at the EOC, obviously you have to have some timeouts, and there was our structure is such, the facility is such that the operatives get a time to rest. This building where we were housed during Hurricane Elsa, it is a self-sufficient building, and we have sectioned it in such a way that there were areas for the operational workings and also for persons to have a timeout and have rest. Obviously, there was the constant movement of information, and we had to ensure that there was that constant information flow and even presenting that information not only to the responders within the room but to the public. A typical day also included ensuring that persons got enough rest and feeding throughout that 24-hour cycle, and even counseling persons that would call on the phone. There were some persons, yes, they may call in the EOC to report damage, but there were some persons who really had nobody else to talk to. They were a bit scared based with the conditions out there, the howling wind and that type of thing. And sometimes you had to take a break just to speak to them and try to console persons, um, because they were calling out for a level of assistance. And once we can give it, we would do that. But it is really a non-stop kind of response in the early days.
Now, after Hurricane Elsa, the remainder of the hurricane season for Barbados was dormant. So when things aren't happening, that tangible things that we can see, what's going on at the DEM? Talk to us about the latter months of the hurricane season.
Well, our work didn't stop. The initial response in terms of Elsa, whereas you may not have had the activation of the EOC, you were still actively dealing with the public and supporting the recovery. No, the Department of Emergency Management would take a secondary role in there. And the recovery agencies, such as housing, we would support them. So you still had the damage assessments were ongoing, the socioeconomic assessments, which other agencies within the national system would have been dealing with, gathering information on the ground so that you can support and help the public that was affected. So we're still dealing with some calls, although that has slowed, but persons just checking up on what is the status in terms of any support that they would have requested, any assistance that they would have requested. Um, we went back to a number, there's still the reporting and the meetings, because, as I said, there are a number of hazards that are still affecting us. So that work did not stop per se. It was placed on the back burner for a while. But now, in these latter months, you really had to continue with the programming, and that included as well the public awareness. You still have to keep that level of awareness, ensuring that the public knows what is going on, knows how to deal with various hazards, um, if they actually start to affect us, and really trying to ensure that our normal quote unquote programming um, still proceeded. We had to pick back up on a lot of meetings, and as I said, a lot of um, actions that we probably had tasks that we had probably put on the back burner during Hurricane Elsa.
Well, definitely a lot of work that you guys are doing at the DEM. Overall, and finally, as we wrap up our brief discussion today, What would you say is the greatest challenge overall for the DEM in terms of disaster preparedness?
I think what we traditionally have to look at, and more so now in this type of environment, is really managing expectations of all our clients. And we are a very minute staff here at the Department of Emergency Management. And we have to call on a number of agencies within the broader national emergency management system, within the broader public sector and private sector to support our goals and programmatic activities. But really, in terms of that disaster preparedness, just trying to manage everyone's expectations. We have to manage the public's expectation of us, ensuring that they have the information available to respond and to manage a disaster or emergency if that occurs. You have a responsibility to the political directorate as well, and those at the policy level and the strategic level, to ensure that they have the relevant information that they can make um, pointed decisions on how the emergency management landscape should look like post 2021, and really trying to improve our programming and our disaster preparedness agenda so that we are really servicing our clientele. We have to manage the expectation of our donor community. They are there to support our national level response. So dealing with all these different groups um, can be very challenging at times, but trying to manage their expectations of us and us trying to manage the expectations of everyone.
Director Kerry Hinds, I want to thank you for giving us some insight into all of the work that the Department of Emergency Management here in Barbados has been doing over the last year when we went through unprecedented, some of the times hazards in hurricane, drought, which is a problem that we are continuing to see, and of
Mhm,
course,
mhm.
ashfall, which is a once in a lifetime type of hazard. Thank you so much for your service and thank you equally for your time.
Thank you so much, Barbados. Season's greetings to everyone, and I hope you take the opportunity to rest and enjoy a little bit without these various hazards, all of these hazards that may have been affecting us in 2021.
Rail Talk in the Face of Danger is a podcast series brought to you by the Department of Emergency Management. I'm Tisha Hines.